once I started zooming out on the map and looking at a big picture and seeing, oh, what's happening? It might be straight offshore where I want to go, but then maybe 50 Ks off the beach, it's cross shore. Then it's not really going to have time to be like super lined up and perfect. The swell is going to be a little bit wobbly.
My guest today is Rambo Estrada. He is a surf photographer from New Zealand, best known for his iconic shots of perfect uncrowded waves. And in order to both photograph and to surf perfect waves, Rambo loves doing both, you have to find them first. And in the first half of this episode, we talk about how to be in the right place at the right time. And in the second half of the interview, we talk about the details and the gear and the techniques and the processes behind the art form of surfing photography. When did you start surfing?
I think when I was maybe 9. Yeah, my dad found a single fin in like a secondhand shop. He decided that would be a good Christmas present for me and my brother. And then so my brother was 6 years older than me, so mostly it was my brother's. But then he went away to boarding school, so then it pretty much became mine.
And this is in the Bay of Plenty somewhere?
I grew up in a little town called Makatu, which is like between Mount Maunganui and Whakatane. But for some reason, we also had a family beach house at Papamoa, so that's where I used to do most of my surfing there.
Mm-hmm. Did you ever compete, or was it always just a passion, sort of a lifestyle?
Yeah, I did compete. I lived in Raglan for 6 years. A lot of my friends were really good surfers, and they were all going to competitions, so I would sort of go along with them. Usually get knocked out in the first round or the second round, but I did actually win the New Zealand University surfing title, mostly because Ben Kennings had like a broken ankle at the time. But that was my one victory.
Yeah. When did you discover photography?
Probably, I actually used to make surf videos when I was younger. That would have been over 20 years ago that I sort of made surf videos. I made one and sold it like nationally, and then I started making another one, and then my computer had a meltdown, and then I just sort of got over it. So I never put the second one out. And then I just sort of transitioned from there into photography. Probably about 15 years ago, I'd say, it was when I started to get into it pretty full on. And then I've been doing photography as my primary source of income for 10 years.
Yep. Okay. Did you study, or did you have a mentor or anything in that space?
No, I didn't do any photography study except for learning things myself. But Corey Scott from New Zealand Surfing Magazine, he was definitely a mentor for me. Like, he taught me so much stuff in the early days, and he would always. He's so good because he doesn't sort of pull any punches or anything. He will just tell you straight up, and it kind of sounds harsh at the time, but it's just the best way to learn. I remember when I was started shooting fisheye sort of stuff, trying to get stuff in the barrel, and I would send him things, and he's like, you've just got to throw yourself over the falls from time to time, otherwise you're not going to get anything. And I would have never done that on my own. And then so whenever you're out swimming, you're like, oh, Corey said. So he's amazing. He's such an epic photographer.
Yeah, that intimacy that you have to have with both the wave and often the surfer you're photographing in the water as a water photographer. Did that experience help you as a surfer at all?
I don't think so, but the surfing side definitely helped the photography side. If that makes sense. Yeah.
In what way?
So you can tell when someone tries surf photography and they don't surf. Just the moments they capture are not the moments you want to see, if that makes sense. So yeah, just so much of knowing what's appealing. I guess the main thing that I like to see when I take a photo of something that gets me stoked, and I don't think you're going to have that feeling of stoke unless you know what it's like to surf.
Yeah, I would say just looking at all of the photos on your website, that's exactly what you capture. Like, looking through your photos makes me want to surf because it makes me realize, oh, there are really good uncrowded waves still out there.
Yeah, yeah. I think my
Is that
main aim is,
intentional?
yeah, I like to shoot what I like to shoot, but definitely I like to inspire people to get out and about and sort of maybe go a little bit beyond their local beach. And there's so much cool stuff out there in New Zealand. I love being on a road trip, and I love meeting people on the road. So yeah, it'd be cool to inspire people to get out and about and sort of check out what else is around, and I think get comfortable with getting skunked is the main thing. So get comfortable with not finding good waves, but maybe next, maybe you might learn a little something that time about, that this beach is no good in a northwest swell, but then if it's a southeast swell, might be epic.
Yeah, that's what puts people off. What percentage of trips or days is hit and miss? Like what's the harsh reality on that, do you reckon?
I don't actually shoot a ridiculous amount now. I just sit and wait, and then I have my zones that I like to go to, and then unless it looks like on paper it's going to be better than a 7 out of 10, I probably wouldn't go. And then hoping it's going to be more like a 9 to maybe a 10 out of 10. But I mean, at worst, it's probably going to be a 6, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So it's the forecasting and everything's so good now. And then I've also improved a lot in working out, because I always used to look at, you'd have your dot on the map and you'd look at the swell direction and the wind direction, and that was pretty much all I'd look at. Whereas once I started looking, zooming out on the map and looking at a big picture and seeing, what's happening, it might be straight offshore where I want to go, but then maybe 50 k's off the beach it's cross shore. So sort of once I worked that kind of stuff out, I don't get skunked that often, I guess.
Are you saying that if it's cross shore 50 k's up the beach, that wind is going to affect the offshore area?
If it's offshore where I am, say I live in Mount Maunganui, if it's offshore here, but 50 k's straight out, the direction the swell's coming from, if it's cross shore, then it's not really going to have time to be like super lined up and perfect. The swell's going to be a little bit wobbly. The longer I shoot, the fussier I get. So I only really like, really perfect straight offshore groomed sort of waves. And I've been to Raglan many times when you think it's offshore, but it's kind of, the swell's a little bit wobbly, and then same here. So yeah, it's definitely looking where the swell's coming from and what the wind's like out there definitely helps out a lot.
Yeah, that's a good tip. I haven't heard that one before. I like that. Because yeah, there's not that many days where it is like that, is there? But then you seem to capture so many of them.
I don't. It looks like I do, but the thing is, I've been sort of 10 to 15 years of. I actually had a look through a folder last night, and it was a folder I made for a competition from 10 years ago, and there was heaps of stuff in there, and I was like, oh, I could post that now. Like, it's pretty good. So there's things you can pull out of the archive. So like one swell day, for example, might give you like 15 really good images, but you're only going to post one at that time. But then at a later stage, you're going to post those, you might post those 14 other ones. So yeah, it's probably a little bit of smoke and mirrors of just continually putting things out, but I only really, I might only get 10 good days of surf a year. But that's enough.
Okay. If there's 10 good days, how many days are you skunked?
Probably similar amount. Yeah.
That's pretty good. Yeah. That's 50%. That's pretty good.
Yeah. If I'm at home, I like I was saying, I just don't go unless I think it's going to be, really good. And then if I'm doing like a road trip, so when you go down the South Island, you're committed. So it's not like you can pick and choose for South Island. So I've got a trip coming up, and it's 3 weeks and from the end of this month. But what I do then is I'll look at the forecast And like I don't just like going on a trip for surf. So I'll look at the forecast and I'll be like, okay, these are going to be the good surf days. These other days I'm going to go up into the mountains, or I'm going to do a hike, or maybe I'll go catch up with some friends or something like that. So try and the worst and best thing, the first South Island trip I ever did, I went to the bottom of the South Island and the waves were good, and I stayed there for 10 days, and then I drove home and I got like really cool surf images. But then when I got home, I was like, man, I feel like I missed out on everything else the South Island has to offer. So I feel like it's important when you're away. And that's why surf photography is like a really good balance, because it's not good all the time. So it gives you opportunities to explore these other epic things that I probably wouldn't go down the South Island just to take photos of mountains or just to go for a hike or whatever. But because I'm there already, it works out really nicely.
Yeah, that sense of adventure, and that's what your photography just has, that sort of feel to it too. It inspires not only us, the froth within us as surfers, but the adventurer as well.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah, it definitely comes across, and it's not an easy thing to do as an artist, because that's what, like, there's some photographers out there, I won't name any names, but the stuff you just see a bunch of close up airs in all the magazines nowadays, and it's just there's no art to it. Whereas your images have they give a feeling of adventure and stoke, and it's awesome.
Yeah, I think the main thing I like to bring into my imagery is like a little bit of context. So if you see like a perfect wave and it's just the wave on its own, it doesn't really give you a feeling of what it's like to be there. It could be in the South Island, it could be in Tahiti, it could be in Hawaii, it could be anywhere. So bringing other elements into the frame, definitely is something that is going to give you way more of a feeling of what it's actually like to be there, or maybe a desire to go to those places, or just a desire to get out there and get exploring, rather than just a perfect wave on its own.
Yeah. How do you feel? Is it hard as a surfer? Like if you're sitting there waiting for, a really nice set to get a nice image, to not actually be out there surfing that set?
Not really for me. I used to be really obsessed with surfing, and then as sort of life went on, I sort of became to realize it's just another fun thing that you can do when you've got time. And so I probably surf more than I shoot, because I'm really, really fussy about what conditions I shoot in. So when it comes to the time when it is those conditions, I'm just so stoked that it's finally one of those days that and I feel like when I'm shooting, in a way, I can catch every wave. Sounds kind of corny, but like I can capture every wave. Whereas if I'm surfing, you might only catch 4 or 5 waves that are really good ones. I'm definitely happy to be shooting when it's really good, because that's what I wait for.
I'm going to ask you about the surf culture as a whole, because I know you've done a lot of work, with magazines and trips and stuff, as well as the arty stuff that you do. There's almost like 2 different types of surfers. There's the lifestyle weekend warrior, spiritual surfer, and then there's the hardcore, this is my career, get the best photo of me type of surfer. Did you find it hard to integrate with that culture?
I actually don't really shoot that much surf action anymore. I used to when I started. I found that for me, when you're shooting surf action, you're relying on what the surfer is doing to create a good image. And so many times, I might be in a perfect spot and I've been swimming for like 3 hours, and then this epic one comes through and the surfer catches it, and then he does some stupid thing with his hands, like throws a double shucker or something. And I'm like, oh man, just ruined everything for me. Yeah, I used to find, or there'll be other times where you'll travel with surfers and the light's going to be amazing, like first thing in the morning, everyone wants to go get a coffee or anything like that. So I found that if I just sort of eliminated the surfer out of the equation and it was more just me in the ocean, that it was a lot more satisfying. Because yeah, if something didn't come off, then I'm not going to get angry at the ocean. It's just me that let the side down, you know. So yeah, I found the more I shot, the more I liked just shooting myself. And so that's why a lot of what I put out there are sort of empty waves and line up shots. And then occasionally this surface out and I'll get nice photos of a surfer, but it's more just sort of, yeah, myself
Mm,
in the ocean, where I'm at.
yeah. Did you feel the pressure in those early days when you were doing that style of photography? Because for most people that want to, make a career out of surfing photography, that's kind of the pathway, right? It's like you go to Hawaii during the winter and sit on the beach, or go to trips with the pros, and but you managed to stick to your guns, and you've developed an incredible style because of that. But was there a time where that pressure was like was there a crossroads there?
I still every time I shoot, if you're on the beach with, a big lens, everyone that's surfing in their mind, they think you're taking photos of them. So no matter who it is out in the water, they always and every if you're ever on the beach, they'll someone comes in from surfing and they'll be like, "Oh, hey mate, you getting any good shots?" And what they're actually asking is like, "Did you get a good photo of me?" So I definitely do. You do sort of feel it all the time, and then like if someone gets a really good wave and I'm there, I'm stoked to take a photo of it, but it's not my sort of primary reason for being there. I guess as I sort of transitioned into that, there was probably a disappointment. You feel people's disappointment, and it's hard not to take that on board yourself.
Mm.
Um, but yeah, you've just kind of got to follow your own path, and if you can get something of someone else on the way, that's awesome. If not, then it's your path, and that's what you chose.
Yeah, it sounds like that's quite a strong presence within yourself. Is that I'm just going to follow what I like. I'm not going to try and be commercial or career driven necessarily. You're sort of in it for the right reasons, essentially.
Yeah, make me sound like I'm soulful.
Well, no, definitely, and it comes across in your photography, and it's like and as it takes years of, but now you're finally there, and you've got this incredible website and images that are they're timeless. I mean, that type of image is going to stand the test of time. Things like, and it's like, it's funny because you look at the magazine culture, and those are the only ones that have actually made it, right? The Surfer's Journal is the only one that's left,
Yeah,
right?
for
And,
sure.
and that's kind of like your style of photography too, is in the surfing stuff at least. And I think that's what will always stand the test of time, is that type of imagery.
I think with magazines, everything was pretty advertising driven. And so, at the peak of the surf industry, the brands had so much money to throw around, and so they were paying big dollars for advertising in magazines. But in return, the magazines, felt like, oh, we've got to feature their logo often with their team rider. And so I think that's probably the reason why just straight up, very closely cropped surf action was what the magazines were full of. It may not have been what the people buying the magazines wanted,
Mm.
but it's just the way that the magazine was structured. And as soon as like things like social media came around, the people themselves got to show what they actually liked. I feel like that's when people started to realize, oh, like most people actually like pictures of like empty waves or perfect line up shots and that kind of stuff. Yeah, it's an interesting one, and yeah, like you say, the magazines that are successful now definitely have are still around. There's like Australia still has quite a few surf magazines, surprisingly amount of surf magazines compared to the States.
Mm.
um but yeah, like magazines like White Horses and Surfers Journal are more about, yeah, the culture of surfing, and yeah, and epic locations rather than, yeah, straight up really tight crop action shot.
Yeah. What about this? So a lot of surfers are, I don't know, amateur surf photographers. Any tips for capturing those moments?
The main thing is just patience. You have to be prepared to stand there and wait and wait and wait and wait. If the waves are good enough, like if the waves were like super perfect, say if you were on a trip to Indonesia where there's just groomed swells and perfect reef breaks, then you can easily just grab a snap quickly before you go for a surf. But yeah, somewhere like New Zealand, you've got to be quite a lot bit more patient because our windows are so much smaller, or like really epic waves.
Mm.
So patience is a big one, and you kind of have to be prepared to sacrifice maybe a little bit of surf time. Um, and if I feel like most surfers, if the waves are really good, they're just going to get frothed out, put their wetsuit on, run out there, go for a surf as long as they can until maybe the waves aren't as good, then come in and then try and take a photo and be like, oh, it was really good, but it's kind of gone on. New Zealand's a classic. It'll go onshore, right? Like it's offshore in the mornings, and then you surf. You might surf for 2 to 3 hours, and then the sea breeze comes up. So it'd be a matter of maybe just sacrificing that first sort of 10 or 15 minutes of your surf and getting something that was really cool then, and then yeah. And at the end of the day, you're not really missing out on that much surf time, but you could capture something that was really cool.
Mm. What about gear? Like let's say I had 2.5 grand and I wanted to buy a decent camera that was also conducive to landscape and surf photography. Any advice in that direction?
Yeah, gears. There's so much amazing gear out there, and it really you really kind of have to drill down on what you wanted to focus on. So some people they think of surf photography as standing on the beach with like a longer lens, and then other people think of surf photography as swimming in the water with a housing, and they're two quite sort of separate kit, I guess. But yeah, I shoot with like Sony mirrorless cameras, and
Mm-hmm.
they have a really good range, which is there's like they basically start with A6 and then have three other numerals on them, but they're like the A6400 is that's like a really good all-round camera. I actually I borrowed one and I shot with it for like a month, and I was supposed to make a YouTube video about shooting with an entry-level camera, but I never got the video finished. But yeah, I found that was like a really really good camera just to get started with. So it would be, yeah, that camera would be great. And then it would just be a matter of lenses. With lenses, you want to spend as much as you can.
Mm.
So if you had say $2,000 to spend on a lens, and there was a lens that was two and a half, and there was a lens at 1,500, it's probably better spending that little bit extra. Like saving for a little bit longer and getting that slightly better lens, because the image quality that you'll get from a better lens is going to be so much superior. But yeah, when I first started, I was really cheap as far as like what I would spend. So I would always look for a bargain, and then eventually I would outgrow that, but I think starting off like low end, and then once you find that equipment's holding you back, then upgrading can be a good option as well. But yeah, for me, I remember I shot a wedding, and I had a cheaper lens, and then I took a photo of the bridal party. I had another lens I could use, but this one I had new. I'd like picked it up secondhand, and I was like real frothed out on it for some reason. And then when I was going through the photos later on, the groomsmen on each end of the bridal party were like super soft out of focus, because it was a cheaper lens, and on
Mm.
a cheaper lens it's going to sharpen the middle and softer on the edges. So that was a pretty harsh lesson, that I had outgrown that lens, and I needed to upgrade.
Mm. In terms of the technicality of things, you would have started out when it was all film and light meters and stuff, and now the the technology with cameras is just so incredible. With you just put it on auto setting. Are, are you guilty of that? Just using the auto setting, or you're always in control of the aperture and the shutter speed, etc.?
Yeah, so I shoot a kind of a hybrid way of shooting. So I shoot in aperture priority, which means I'm controlling the aperture because the aperture is the main thing that's going to give the look and feel of your photo.
Mm-hmm.
People that aren't really that photography minded, a lower aperture, which is a larger hole in the lens, letting in more light, is going to give you like a nice soft background. So if you're shooting a portrait, you'd shoot like a low aperture, and then a higher aperture is going to make everything in focus. So that can affect the look and feel of your image. Not really a whole heap for like a lineup shot because it's quite wide. So you're not really going to have like a shallow depth of field. So yeah, the way I shoot is aperture priority. And then there's a way that you can have an auto ISO. So your ISO is going up and down. And then the shutter speed, you can give it a minimum shutter speed. So I'll usually do it so it won't drop. The shutter speed can't drop below 1,000, but it can go above 1,000 if needed to. So then that way you're pretty much controlling your shutter and you're controlling your aperture, but you're letting your ISO roam. So that means that if you're shooting like a perfect left-hander that way and you're looking into the sun, and then a right-hander comes this way and you're with the sun, then your camera is going to adjust, and then that way you can capture everything. And it may not be 100% perfect, but there's enough leeway when you shoot a raw photo that you can pull it up or pull it down, and you're going to get it close enough. Yeah. So that's the way that I've found to shoot the most economically with your settings, and then also so you're basically never going to take a terrible photo if you shoot like that. Whereas if you shoot fully in manual and you shoot something that's like from in bright sunlight to the shade, then that way you don't capture the photo. You've pretty much lost it.
Yeah. So I mean, ISO was originally a rating for the fineness of the grain of film. So ISO nowadays is represents the resolution of the image. Is that correct?
No, it's how sensitive the sensor is. So it's about the sensor sensitivity. So the lower your ISO, the cleaner the less sensitive your sensor is, but the cleaner image you're going to get. And then the higher your ISO, it means that your sensor is a lot more sensitive, but you're not going to get as clean an image. So you're just going to get it's sort of the same as film. If you shot like a high ISO film, it's going to end up quite grainy, and that's exactly this photography.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. So the type of camera that has the range to be able to do what you just said, prioritize and minimum shutter speed. You're in the Sony. What's the Sony that has those all of those mirrorless?
All of the ones do, yeah.
Okay.
It will just be you'd have to go back. There's a camera called the A6000, which was like Sony's first decent mirrorless camera, I reckon. And then that one doesn't do it, but that camera is probably like 8 to 9 years old now. Pretty much anything newer than that does. It's just you have to hunt around. It's not something that's intuitive to like find on your settings. You kind of have to have you have to have that knowledge and know it's possible in the first place, and then you kind of got to dig around to find it. It's called an ISO minimum shutter speed. So I actually have it as a custom button because it's something that I use a lot. So I had that set up as a custom button, and if I was shooting like lifestyle, I just drop that down to 2/50th of a second. Shoot lifestyle of that, because your lifestyle is not, someone's not really moving very quickly when you're taking a portrait or whatever. And then if I quickly went to action, then I just hit that custom button and I'd change it up to 1,000th of a second, and then go from there, and then it's good for action.
Interesting. So you'd use a similar type of setting for wedding stuff?
Yeah, I do exactly. That's exactly the same as how I'd shoot a wedding, but I make the minimum shutter speed 2/50th of a second for a wedding, and then 1,000th for action. Yeah. So it's a really simple. And then the other cool thing about cameras as well is they'll have a exposure compensation dial. So because you're looking through a mirrorless camera, what you see in your viewfinder is what you're going to get in your photo, because it's seeing what's on the sensor.
Mm.
And then so if you're finding, what you'll find is your camera's metering it's trying to make everything 50% gray. That's basically how your camera tries to meter. So in its mind, it's trying to balance everything in the frame. So it's 50% gray. So if you were shooting surfing, for example, and there's massive black cliff behind the surfer, your camera is going to think, oh, okay, this is, this whole scene's very dark. I need to bring the exposure up. And so what will happen is your surfer and the wave, if they were small in the frame and there was a big cliff, your surfer and the wave are going to end up way too bright. And so that's when there's like a little exposure compensation wheel, and you can say, oh, I actually want this to be one stop darker than what you're going to meter. You tell the camera that.
Okay.
So I'll probably get a bit deep here. So you can basically, if you're looking through the viewfinder and you're thinking, oh, my photo's a bit bright or a bit dark, you just get that exposure wheel, compensation wheel, and you push it down or push it up, and it just brings it up or down. Yeah, it's probably a bit much. I'm probably going a bit deep.
So if you're shooting RAW, you're stuck with the exposure of that single image, no matter what.
You are, but you can push it up and down when you do your post-production. So in Lightroom, you can probably go, it depends on how good your camera is, but the dynamic range of your sensor, which means how much of the really light information, how much of the really dark information it captures. So the better your sensor, the more dynamic range it's going to have. And so the more dynamic range you have, the more you can push your exposure up or down and rescue things that you may have ruined.
Okay. So that's why you'd buy a better camera body to get that sort of thing.
It might not be why you'd buy it, but it's definitely like a real bonus for sure.
Yeah. So if you've got the ISO as the variable and a minimum shutter speed, and you're controlling the aperture,
yep.
And then you've got the exposure compensation you're talking about. Is that something that you would do on the fly? It's like, oh, quick, there's a dark cloud. I've got to flick that across to -1 or up 1. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. When you're looking through the viewfinder, you'll see, oh, okay, this shot looks like it's going to be a bit dark, so you might just pump it up a little bit, or you might bring it down a little bit. Yeah. But if I was going for there's a favorite spot of mine in the South Island that has massive dark cliff behind it. So if I was going out for a swim, and I was shooting there, I would set the exposure compensation down by pretty much a whole stop, even before I put the camera in the housing, because I know I'm going to be shooting in that direction. I'm going to be shooting with that cliff. Mm-hmm. And then when I'm on the fly and I'm shooting, I might adjust it a little bit here and there. But yeah, most of the time I'd probably just leave it at that.
Yep. And do you use autofocus?
Yep. Yeah. So you use a continuous autofocus, which means that if you're holding your finger down, half down on the trigger, whatever is in your little focal point is going to keep adjusting, so that's in focus. So if you're shooting a surfer and he's coming towards you like that, as long as you got your finger half down and they're in your little focal point, then the focus is going to adjust as they come closer and closer.
Because you can change different meter settings, right? Is it like you want it to focus on the center of your image, or take an average, or whatever? Do you play around with those settings a lot?
Not heaps. I'll use what we call a medium spot. So it's like a medium size point in the frame, and I'll know where that is, and so that's where I'll try and position what I'm shooting. And then if I'm shooting in the water, then I'll I usually have it in the middle because, there's a wave coming at you. It's pretty much just going to be in the middle of your frame. But if I wanted to shoot like a massive backdrop, like a real big backdrop and have the wave low in the frame, then you'd move that focal point like a little bit lower in the frame.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I don't usually move it a lot. It'll just be, I've actually only just got a housing now where it's easy to move because it's quite a hard control to have. It's like a little tiny joystick. And if you're doing that with buttons, it's quite difficult. So yeah, I'm enjoying the luxury of being able to move it around, but I'd probably only move it like 3 or 4 times a swim.
When you're in the water, what's your solution to having the water droplets in front of the lens?
It depends on what the front element's made of. You can get most housing companies, their front elements made out of like a perspex or acrylic, I guess. Perspex and acrylics, maybe they're the same thing. Then the housings I use are called Sea Frogs. They have a glass front element. And so I actually used to, when I used to shoot with a different housing brand, I used to get the acrylic element knocked out and then get some glass cut for it and silicone that in instead, because I find that glass is going to have like a lot flatter, smoother surface. So water's going to drain off that a lot easier. And then also glass is a lot more scratch resistant. So if you get a scratch in your acrylic, then a water droplet's more likely to stick to that scratch and not sort of bead off. So when it comes to glass, I just use what Rain-X, which you buy at the service station. You're supposed to put
yeah.
So I use that, and that helps the water drain off really nice and easily. You have to be Rain-X apparently isn't great for O-rings, like the seals around the edge of your port. So you don't really want to like pour Rain-X on it and have it like go everywhere. I just put it on a cloth and then like rub it on.
Yeah.
And so that works well. And then yeah, you might find after like a couple of hours the Rain-X starts to wear off. And then this is a tip from my guru Corey Scott that he gave me back in the day. If you put like your finger behind your ear like that, you'll usually have like a bit of natural body oils there, and you can rub that on your port, and then you'll find that it works similar to the Rain-X. Yeah. So that's for glass. And then for perspex, yeah, there's all sorts of different things people do. I used to use turtle wax. So what the turtle wax is doing is it's sort of filling any of those like real tiny little scratches and giving you like a surface, and then it will run off. But so that's for what we call a flat port, which is like I don't really shoot below a 50 mil in the water. So I shoot between a 50 mil and a 200 mil, depending on how I'm feeling and what the situation is. And so for those ones, they're designed so you shoot through what we call a dry port. So that means, you don't want any water on the port at all. And then if you're shooting a wide lens with a dome port, so it's like a round port like that, looks like a big glass mushroom, basically. What you want there is you actually want a layer of water to stick to the dome, and you shoot through a layer of water. So you've got a very, very thin layer of water and you're shooting through it. I think the idea is with those is it's because it's such a massive surface that it's just near impossible to get. So it's dry. So it's all round. It's like, it's not really going to sheet off like it would on a flat port. And so with a dome port, it's designed so you shoot through a layer of water. So if a guy's shooting fisheye, you'd swim with the camera in the water. Just before the surfer gets to you, you'd pull it out. The bulk of the water comes off, a little layer sticks to it, and then you might have maybe 2 or 3 seconds before that layer starts to dissolve. And then so you need to time it. And fisheye, the person needs to be really close anyway, and generally it's only like about 1 second worth of shooting as they whip past. So to keep a layer of water on there's the most common thing people do is they spit on it or lick it. And that's pretty easy because you've got endless supply of like spit, and so you can just spit and lick. And then as you pull it out, you'll notice, more water's starting to stick to it. And then some people would use things like a potato, or there's all sorts of because I think it's kind of starchy. I think that helps things stick to it. But yeah, I don't really shoot. I probably shoot with a dome port maybe about once every 2 years. So it's not really something I'm often doing.
Yep. Okay. And then for the land stuff, is all your stuff done with a tripod?
No, very little.
Really? Huh.
Yeah. Most of my land stuff, I don't shoot that tight. So I would use my go-to. I have three long lenses. I have a 70 to 200 mil, a 100 to 400 mil, and a 200 to 600 mil.
Mm-hmm.
But of those, the 100 to 400 is what I use the most because it's the most versatile. So you're only losing 30 mil off the bottom from the 70 to 200, but you're gaining an extra 200 mil on the top. And the 200 to 600, I would usually only shoot that if I was basically on an assignment, shooting surf action, where they wanted some sort of tighter cropped action shots. That's when I'd use that. But yeah, so most of my lineup shots are shot probably between around about 100 and 200 mil. And so it's not super, super tight. And I find when you're got a tripod, you're really just locked into like one composition. If you're shooting like a reef break, which we don't really have in New Zealand, we have a couple, but not that many. So if you're shooting a reef break, the waves are breaking in the same spot every time. So then you might have a tripod, you set your composition up, you're like, okay, the wave's going to break there. This is all good. But most of the time at a beach break, you're sort of just whipping around trying to find things. And I'll often be to get elements in the frame how I want them. I'm moving a lot. So if I see a set coming, 100 meters up the beach, I might take 3 or 4 steps to the right and then crouch down to get elements in the frame to line up to include that wave. So to get the backdrop how I want it, or to get like a bit of foreground. So yeah, so I'm often moving a lot. So yeah, I don't. And if you're shooting over a thousandth of a second, you're not really going to get much in the way of camera shake where you need a tripod. So yeah, I'll often just be going rogue on my own. The other time where I use a tripod is if I'm shooting like a little bit of video as well. Because yeah, with video you definitely need to have a tripod for sure.
Yeah. So if you're shooting above 1,000, you don't see the need for a tripod or a monopod.
No, I think if you're shooting above 1,000 and sort of not a real long focal length, then you don't really need one. If you're shooting say if I was shooting 600 mil at 1,000th of a second, everything's exaggerated. So if you've got a slight movement like that on a really long lens, it's going to exaggerate that movement. So then you might get a camera shake at 1,000th of a second. So you might, if you're shooting handheld at 600 mil, you might want to maybe go up to 2,000ths of a second just to be safe if there's enough light.
Yep. And when you say handheld, is there any purposeful, like keep the camera still? Like are you sitting down and putting your elbow on your knee or anything, or is it just trusting the shutter speed?
I'm trying to stay still, but I'll usually, you have 2 points of contact. You've got your hand and then your eye. So both those are keeping it a lot stiller. Some people like to shoot with the screen, but then you've only got like I guess you have 3 points of contact because you've got hand and eye. But with the screen, you've only got the 2, and that's I find quite hard. Whereas like that, it's kind of like locked in. So having your eye as another point of contact definitely helps lock it in. But I'm not really thinking about like keeping super, super still, but I guess I'm also making sure that I'm not moving.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
So I'm not making a priority to be like, oh, you got to stay real still, but I'm like not running while I'm taking the photo.
Yeah, no, that's a good point though. I think a lot of people just use the screen because of digital photography now. They don't use the eyepiece. But yeah, the eyepiece is now another point of stability.
Yeah, for sure.
Is there any other reason why you would use the eyepiece as well?
The screens, it's quite hard to see exactly what your exposure is like when there's sun on it. Um, so yeah, for this, when you're looking through the eyepiece, all the other lights blocked out. So it's just your eye on the eyepiece, and then that way you're getting like a really, really good representation of what your exposure is going to look like.
Hmm.
And yeah, you can see so much easier as well, like all the other settings on the screen. So you can see your aperture or your ISO, your shutter speed, where your focal point is. I find you can just see everything so much easier on the screen.
Hmm. Do you shoot with both eyes open?
No, I've got like this eye's like real wrinkly because that's the one that's like that. I'm not lying, like it's so much more wrinkly than this one. Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, if I see a photo of myself, I'm kind of like that. I like really scrunch it to make sure that nothing gets in there. So I have like kept it open, like on the so from your periphery, you can see if there's something else going on down the beach.
Hmm.
I've also got like a slight crazy eye, like where one eye goes in the slight other direction. But I tell people that's because I'm evolutionary superior as a photographer that I can look at multiple things. But I'm not too sure where that one came from.
Yeah, because I mean, I used to shoot surfing a lot, and I would often try and keep an eye on what's happening with one eye, and then focus on the eyepiece with the other eye.
Yeah, right.
It was a bit. It often made you feel like a bit nauseous, and
For sure. Yeah.
yeah. Oh, cool. Well, thanks for all those tips. It's
No
cool.
problem. It's probably a
Yeah.
bit overload.
No,
You
it's
don't really
good.
want to don't
No,
want to get me started on this stuff. I'll nerd out for sure.
it's good. I'm interested in it, and I'm sure other people are too. I think there's a lot of people that are interested in photography nowadays. So that's all. Those are
Yeah.
all good tips.
One thing as far as like if someone is looking for knowledge on photography, there's one thing I would advise is reading their camera manual from start to finish, because it's easy to get a new camera and just fall into the trap of I need to just work out the things that I want to do, and then when you work those things that you want to do out, you don't want to learn anymore. But I feel like when you know everything your camera can do, then it opens up so much more as far as like your technical knowledge goes. So there may be things that your camera can do that you haven't thought of and you haven't thought to look up. And that could be a massive help too. So that auto ISO feature, for example, the way that I shoot there, that was something I learned from reading a camera manual. And then I was like, well, this could totally change the whole way I shoot.
Hmm.
So yeah, such a really good way of like gaining knowledge and being comfortable with with your level of skill, I guess.
Hmm. Do you miss film?
No, I actually didn't really shoot very much film.
Hmm.
I pretty much came into photography just at the start of like digital photography. So I I had a film camera that I just sort of found after I've been shooting surf video. I found a film camera kicking around at home. I think it was an ex-girlfriend's one from like photography class at school. And I messed around with that a lot, and I learned like the basics of like the exposure triangle and that kind of stuff. But as soon as digital photography came in, I was like, oh yeah, film's dead to me. Like it's this. So I don't really miss it at all. But my
Hmm.
partner, she loves film, and I've bought many film cameras and many film lenses for her for like Christmases and birthdays. She has like full. She actually has like one of the last high end SLR Canon SLRs that it was a professional film camera body, and she has like a big lens and stuff that she uses for surfing. So yeah, I'm still around it a lot, but
Yeah.
yeah, I sort of strive. I always I get a kick out of getting the most technically perfect image that I can.
Hmm.
Um, so I find that's quite satisfying. So if I look at, say, if I looked at a photo and because you can see the metadata, which tells you what all your settings were. So if I was reviewing a photo and I was like, oh, I shot this photo at 2,500 of a second, um, I feel like I failed, because if I shot it at a thousandth of a second, then I could have halved my ISO and had like a little bit cleaner image. So
Mm.
you'd never be able to tell the difference. Like if you're looking at the photo, even in a magazine, you might not be able to tell the difference. But for me, like I just get a real kick out of having it as technically perfect as I can. And
Yeah.
it's highly unlikely that I'm one of those photographers that's going to go back to film, because I'm always looking forward to what's gonna give me something that's gonna be technically superior.
Yeah, and it shows in your photography that it's very technical, like picture perfect. That no pun intended. But
Yeah.
what about that? Because I found when I started in film and then went to digital, and the first thing I noticed is like, oh man, I just take way too many photos now. Because
Yeah.
if each photo used to literally cost you money when it was filmed, so you were very selective with pushing the shutter.
Yeah.
Is do you find it as you grow as a photographer, you take less and less?
Uh, I take a lot of photos. Yeah, I take a lot, and I have a really fast culling program called Photo Mechanic. It's it has a way where it reads. So when you shoot a raw photo, within that raw, there's a small JPEG embedded into the raw, and that JPEG is what you're viewing on the back of the camera. So that's its reason. So when you look at your photos on the back of your camera, you're not actually looking at the raw file, you're looking at a very small JPEG. And so this application called Photo Mechanic, it when you sort through, it actually shows you the JPEG. It doesn't show you the raw, so it shows you the embedded JPEG. So you can go through really, really quick. So I
Ah,
just have one finger on the arrow, and then I have another finger on like the number two, because that's comfortable for me on the keyboard. And when I see a photo I like, I just hit number two, and then I literally just go this fast. Like I'm going that fast. I'm like, oh yeah, that one's pretty good. Wang. And then I cull. I usually will cull off the card. So I put the card in my computer, then I bring up Photo Mechanic, and then I make my selects off there, and then I only import in the ones that I like. So that way, I might shoot 2000 photos, and I might import 20.
okay. So
And
so
that way,
you're let me get this straight. You're culling from the card itself via the JPEG, so it's fast. And then when
Mhm.
you download the raw, you've done your culling already. That
Yeah,
makes
yeah, yeah,
that's life changing. That makes sense.
yeah. So it doesn't take that long for
Yeah.
me to sort photos. And it's also quite exciting for me sorting through the photos. It's fun.
Mm.
So it's not like it's a chore. So yeah, I don't really hold back on shooting, because so many times you'll decide not to shoot, and you'll look, and then a wave will just be breaking, and then it'll flare up into like this huge tube from a little bit of backwash hitting or something. So you can't I put so much energy into being at these places. So I might be down the bottom of the South Island. So the last thing I want to do is miss a moment, I guess. So yeah, I'm not shy to have a heavy trigger finger.
Hmm. Oh, cool. No, that makes sense. That program sounds life changing. Do you cull on the fly at all? Do you like scan back and delete? Oh, that, or do you just do it all in post?
On the camera.
Yeah.
Nah. Like the act of like deleting on the camera, because you have to confirm it, like the camera doesn't
Mm.
want you to accidentally something. So it's like a three-stage sort of thing to delete off the camera. So that's just so time consuming that I know it's going to be way, way quicker for me to just do it on the computer later on.
Yeah.
So I
Oh,
think I
awesome.
shoot the difference between because I shoot quite a few weddings as well.
Hmm.
And so weddings, you're used to culling massive amounts of images, like every every Saturday and Sunday, like after you've shot a Friday and a Saturday wedding, you're used to culling through like 8,000 images or something. So yeah, for a surf shoot, it feels easy.
Okay. Well, let us know your website.
It's estradasurfing.co.nz
All right.
is my So where all my surf image stuff lives. Yeah.
Yep.
But
And
basically, if you search for Rambo and photography, the first thing that comes up is a meme of like Sylvester Stallone as Rambo with someone's like photoshopped a camera and he's taking a photo of a butterfly. And then pretty much everything after that is usually me. So I'm
Yep.
pretty easy to find.
All right. Okay.
Just got to beat that meme one day.
Yep. Okay. So, and what about Instagram?
Rambo Estrada. Yeah. At Rambo Estrada. Yeah.
Yep.
Pretty
Cool.
easy.
Well, I urge listeners to go and check out the Instagram and the website. Images are incredible. There's loads of awesome. If you're looking for something to hang on the wall, I mean, it's right there. Your images are incredible. So I encourage listeners to go and check that out. I will put links in the show notes to that website and that Instagram handle as well. And we'll share some of your images when we release this as well. Get people.
Yeah,
Awesome, man. Well, thank you for taking the time today. Really appreciate that.
Too easy.
Cool. Thanks, man.
All right. Take it easy.